Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. I knew something was off the second Sophie asked me to meet her at the coffee shop downtown on a Tuesday afternoon. That alone made no sense. Sophie hated that place, said the chairs were uncomfortable and the coffee tasted burnt. But when I walked in, she was already sitting near the window with both hands wrapped around a cup she hadn't touched. No smile, no phone in her hand, just waiting. I sat across from her and set my keys on the table. "You look like you're about to fire somebody." Her mouth tightened a little. "Ronald, don't start." That told me everything. I leaned back in the chair. "All right, say it." She took a breath like she practiced it in the mirror first. "I want a divorce." People always imagine moments like that come with emotion. Tears, shaking hands, silence. This didn't. She said it flat, clean, like she was reading off a checklist. I looked at her for a few seconds, then nodded once. "How long have you been planning this?" Her eyes narrowed immediately. "That's your first question? Should it be my last?" A waiter walked by carrying drinks. Sophie waited until he passed before speaking again. "We haven't been happy in a long time." "No," I said calmly. "You haven't been happy in a long time. Don't rewrite my side for me." That irritated her. I could see it in the way she crossed her arms. "You always do this," she said. "You sit there acting calm like nothing affects you." "I'm calm because I saw this coming months ago." That caught her off guard. "You did not." I shrugged. "You stopped talking to me unless it was logistics. You guarded your phone like state secrets. And 3 weeks ago, you suddenly cared about going to the gym after work." Her face hardened. "So what, Ronald? You want a medal for noticing?" "No," I said. "I want honesty." She looked away toward the window. "I already spoke to an attorney." There it was. Not confusion, not emotion. Preparation. I nodded slowly. "So this meeting wasn't about fixing anything." Sophie finally picked up the coffee and took a sip. "There's nothing left to fix." I leaned forward slightly. "Then let me make something clear before this turns into one of those messy little games people play." Her eyes met mine again. "If you're leaving," I said evenly, "you leave all the way. No emotional backtracking. No using me while figuring yourself out. No speeches about needing space while I keep paying for your comfort." She scoffed softly. "Wow, straight to money." "No," I replied. "Straight to boundaries." For the first time since I sat down, Sophie looked uncertain. Just for a second. Then she recovered. "You really don't care, do you?" I stood up, grabbed my keys, and tossed a few bills onto the table for the untouched coffee. I care enough not to let disrespect move into my house. The house changed the second we got back. Not emotionally, structurally. Sophie walked upstairs like the conversation at the coffee shop was supposed to leave me stunned in place. Instead, I went straight into my office, opened my laptop, and started separating everything that could be separated. Accounts, subscriptions, automatic payments. By midnight, every shared password was changed except the utilities and mortgage. The next morning, Sophie came downstairs wearing workout clothes like nothing had happened. She stopped when she saw a folder sitting on the kitchen counter. "What's this?" "Temporary rules," I said without looking up from my coffee. She laughed once. "Rules?" "Yes." She opened the folder. "Separate expenses. Written communication for anything financial. Guest room arrangement. No using joint cards without discussion. No bringing people into the house." Her face tightened more with every page. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said calmly. "I'm being organized." She tossed the papers onto the counter. "You're seriously treating me like a stranger already?" I looked directly at her then. "You hired an attorney before speaking to your husband. You made us strangers first." That landed harder than she expected. She grabbed her water bottle and left without another word. Later that afternoon, I met Dave at his auto shop outside town. Dave was the kind of man who spoke slowly because he didn't waste words. He wiped grease off his hands and leaned against a workbench while I explained everything. "She already had a lawyer," I finished. Dave nodded once. "Then she didn't come to you with emotion. She came with a plan." "Exactly." He studied me for a second. "And now she's waiting for you to panic." I smirked faintly. "Not happening." "Good," he said. "Because once guilt stops working, they switch tactics." That line stayed in my head all evening. Around 7, I walked into the kitchen and stopped. Candles, music playing low, Sophie standing near the stove stirring pasta sauce like we were suddenly back in happier years. She looked over her shoulder carefully. I thought maybe we could eat together. I set my bag down slowly. Why? Her expression softened. Because maybe I handled things badly. There it is, I said quietly. What? The pivot. She frowned. I'm trying to be civil. You asked for a divorce yesterday, and now I'm trying not to make this ugly. I walked closer, stopping across the island from her. No, I said. You're trying to see if I'll chase you. Silence. Then Sophie folded her arms. You really think highly of yourself. I think clearly, I replied. She stared at me for a long moment. So, that's it? You're just done? I picked up my glass of water. No, I said evenly. You're the one who's done. I'm just adjusting faster than you expected. 3 weeks later, we sat across from each other in a mediation office downtown. Gray walls, cheap coffee, artificial calm. Sophie walked in beside her attorney, Richard Holloway, wearing a white blazer and the same expression she used whenever she thought she controlled the room. I stayed seated. My attorney, Evelyn Grant, flipped through a folder beside me without looking impressed by any of it. Richard started first. Ronald, he said smoothly, we'd like to keep this productive and respectful. I nodded once. Then let's skip the performance and get to numbers. Sophie's jaw tightened immediately. Richard cleared his throat. Sophie sacrificed a lot during this marriage. We believe it's fair she remains in the home temporarily while receiving transitional support. Evelyn finally looked up. Temporarily meaning? Richard slid papers across the table. 12 months. I almost laughed. Sophie folded her hands calmly. I need stability while I rebuild. I looked directly at her. You had stability. Her eyes sharpened. That's exactly the problem. Everything with you was controlled, predictable. Evelyn cut in before I answered. Interesting choice of words considering Ronald paid the mortgage, insurance, renovations, and both vehicle loans. Richard smiled tightly. Marriage isn't just financial. No, Evelyn agreed, but divorce is. That took some air out of the room. Richard tried another angle. Sophie also contributed emotionally to the relationship. I leaned forward slightly. Emotionally? Sophie crossed her arms. Don't do this. No, I said calmly. Let's do it properly. You called me emotionally empty while opening 2 credit cards behind my back. Richard blinked. Excuse me? Evelyn opened another folder and slid documents onto the table. Balances, statements, payment histories. Sophie's face lost color instantly. You went through my things? She snapped. I went through my finances, I corrected. Richard grabbed the papers fast, scanning them. Sophie? She looked away. Evelyn stayed calm. One of these cards was used for trips Ronald never knew about. The room got very quiet after that. I watched Sophie carefully. Not angry, calculating, trying to recover. Finally, she looked at me again. So, this is revenge? No, I replied. This is accountability. Richard removed his glasses slowly. Why wasn't this disclosed earlier? Sophie's voice hardened. Because it's irrelevant. It became relevant, Evelyn said, the second you asked Ronald to continue financing your lifestyle after the divorce. Sophie turned toward me sharply. You really want to leave me with nothing? I held her stare. You left first. That hit harder than yelling would have. The mediator, an older man named Carl Benson, finally spoke after almost 10 minutes of tension. Based on the financial records, he said carefully, the recommendation is that Ronald retains the property. Sophie stared at him like she misheard the sentence. What? Carl adjusted his glasses. The home remains with Ronald. For the first time since the coffee shop, Sophie looked nervous. Real nervous. Then she turned back to me quietly. You're really going to do this? I stood, buttoned my jacket, and picked up my folder. You wanted freedom, Sophie, I said evenly. Freedom costs money. 5 years later, my life barely looked the same. Not overnight, not through revenge, through routine. I kept the house, renovated the kitchen myself, started my own contracting company 2 years after the divorce, and doubled my income by year 4. I trained every morning before work, stayed disciplined, stayed busy, and stopped explaining my life to people who didn't respect it. The peace became addictive. Then I met Natalie. I met her at a charity event Dave dragged me to because one of his customers sponsored it. She was standing near the bar arguing with a bartender about a broken payment machine while everybody else just stood there complaining. Calm, direct, no drama. That got my attention. 6 months later, she was living with me. One Thursday evening, Natalie was inside making dinner while I grabbed mail from the box near the driveway. That's when a silver SUV pulled up slow beside the curb. I recognized it immediately. Sophie stepped out wearing oversized sunglasses, even though the sun was almost down. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she gave a small, nervous smile. "You look different." "So do you." It was true. The confidence she used to wear so naturally looked forced now, like she was trying to remember how to play someone she hadn't been in years. She glanced toward the house. "Can we talk?" "You're already talking." Her mouth tightened slightly. "Ronald, come on." "No," I said evenly. "You don't get casual access to me anymore." That stung. I saw it in her face immediately. She folded her arms. "I made mistakes. Everybody does. You know that's not what I mean." I stayed quiet. That made her uncomfortable fast. Finally, she sighed. Things didn't work out the way I thought they would. There it was. Not love. Consequences. She stepped a little closer. I was angry back then. I thought I needed something different. And? Her eyes dropped briefly. And I was wrong. Before I could answer, the front door opened behind me. Natalie stepped onto the porch holding a dish towel in one hand. She looked at Sophie once, then at me. "Ronald," she said calmly, "are you letting your past freeze outside or should I lock the door?" Sophie's expression changed instantly. That line hit her harder than anything I could have said. Natalie wasn't emotional, wasn't threatened. That made it worse. Sophie looked toward the house again. The lights were warm inside, music low, dinner cooking. She was seeing the life she walked away from. Natalie rested one hand against the doorframe. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said calmly. "Just handling old business." Sophie laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "Old business? Nice." I looked directly at her. "That's what you became when you left." Her face tightened. Then she tried one last angle. "Can we at least sit down somewhere and talk properly?" "No." The answer came fast enough to surprise even her. I stepped back toward the porch. "You don't miss me, Sophie," I said evenly. "You miss stability." Then Natalie opened the door wider, and without another word, I walked back inside. Sophie didn't take rejection well. At first it was small things. A follow request from a fake account watching Natalie's social media. Then a message from an old mutual friend asking if things were getting messy again. Then Sophie suddenly showing up near my office building twice in the same week. Not inside, just close enough to be noticed. I didn't react publicly. That was the mistake people make. They get emotional too early and expose their position. Instead, I paid attention. One Saturday morning, Natalie walked into the kitchen wearing gym clothes with her phone in her hand. She was outside my studio yesterday. I looked up from my coffee. "Sophie?" Natalie nodded. "Black SUV, parked across the street for 20 minutes. "Did she approach you?" "No, she wanted me to notice her." I leaned back in my chair slowly. That changed things. Later that night, Natalie showed me a post from an anonymous account. No names, no direct accusations, just photos from places we'd been recently with captions written like fake concern. Somebody always replaces you until they realize why you left. People in the comments were already building stories around it. Natalie locked her phone and looked at me. "This is her." "I know. You seem very calm about it." "I'm calm because now I know the game." That afternoon, I called a security company and upgraded the cameras around the house. Motion alerts, license plate capture, cloud storage. Natalie watched me install one near the garage. "You think she'll escalate?" "I think people get dangerous when losing control becomes real." That night, Sophie finally stopped lurking around the edges and texted me directly. Not paragraphs, not apologies, just one sentence. "You replaced me faster than I expected." I stared at it for maybe 3 seconds before locking the phone again. Natalie looked over from the couch. "You gonna answer?" "No." "Why not?" "Because attention is oxygen." She studied me quietly after that. Then she smiled faintly. "You've dealt with difficult people before." I was married to one. The next escalation came 3 days later. Natalie called me while I was driving back from a supplier meeting. Her voice stayed controlled, but I heard the tension underneath immediately. She came into the cafe near my studio. My grip tightened slightly on the wheel. What happened? She sat 2 tables behind me and kept staring. Did she speak to you? A pause. Yeah. What did she say? Natalie exhaled slowly. She told me eventually you'd get tired of pretending to be happy. I went quiet for a second. Then I made a decision. No more reacting, I said calmly. Now we prepare. That evening, Natalie sat across from me at the kitchen table while I organized screenshots, dates, photos, and timestamps into folders. No emotion, just evidence. After a while, she leaned back in her chair. You know what the scary part is? What? She doesn't want you back, Natalie said quietly. She wants me gone. I looked at the files on my laptop and nodded once. Exactly. Natalie came up with the plan the next morning. We were sitting on the back patio before work when she set her coffee down and said, I'll meet her. I looked at her carefully. No. She already wants a reaction, Natalie replied. If we keep avoiding her, she controls the pace. She's unstable. No, Natalie said calmly. She's strategic. There's a difference. That was true. I hated that it was true. Natalie folded her arms on the table. Public place. Daytime. I record everything. You stay nearby. I thought about it for maybe 5 seconds. Then I nodded once. Fine. The meeting happened 2 days later at a small cafe near the river. Natalie went in alone while I parked half a block away with my phone on silent. 27 minutes later, Natalie came back to the truck. No panic, no shaking, just focused. She climbed into the passenger seat and held up her phone. She admitted everything. I looked at her. Play it. At first, Sophie's voice sounded calm, too calm. Then it started spilling out piece by piece. The fake accounts, the posts, watching Natalie outside the studio, showing up near my office. Then came the line that changed everything. Ronald always fixes my problems, Sophie said through the speaker. That's who he is. He always comes back. Natalie paused the recording and looked at me. She really believes that. I stared through the windshield for a long moment. Then I nodded once. Okay. Natalie raised an eyebrow. That's your reaction? No, I said calmly. That's the end of my reaction. That night around 8, the doorbell rang. I already knew who it was before checking the camera. Sophie stood on the porch wearing a fitted black coat like she was arriving for a serious conversation instead of trespassing emotionally into somebody else's life. Natalie looked toward the front door. Want me to get it? Yes. She opened the door halfway. Sophie tried to smile. I need to speak with Ronald. Natalie stayed relaxed against the frame. About which part? The stalking or the online harassment? Sophie's face changed instantly. Excuse me? I stepped into view behind Natalie holding my phone. Hi, Sophie. Her eyes locked onto mine. What is this? I pressed play. Her own voice filled the porch, clear, cold, confessing to everything. The color drained from her face by the second. Turn that off, she snapped. Natalie crossed her arms. Why? It's honest, right? Sophie pointed at her angrily. You recorded me? You confessed, I corrected calmly. She documented. Sophie looked at me desperately then, like she was searching for the old version of me. The man who explained. The man who softened. He wasn't there anymore. This is insane, she whispered. No, I said evenly. This is consequences. She stepped toward the door suddenly. Ronald, listen to me. Stop. My voice cut through the porch hard enough that she froze immediately. I took one step forward. You stopped being my responsibility 5 years ago. Silence. Then Natalie spoke softly without taking her eyes off Sophie. You should leave now. And for the first time since I'd known her, Sophie actually looked powerless. Sophie unraveled fast after that night. Not publicly at first, quietly. The fake accounts disappeared within 2 days. Then mutual friends started calling me asking careful questions without directly saying her name. Turns out Natalie wasn't the only person Sophie had been talking to. She'd told different versions of the story to different people for years. In one version, I was emotionally cold. In another, I was controlling. In another, she was the victim of a loveless marriage. The recording destroyed all of it. Not because I sent it around, because Sophie panicked. That was the interesting part. People usually expose themselves trying to protect themselves. She started calling old friends demanding loyalty, started accusing people of taking sides. One of them finally told her to stop acting like a teenager and hung up on her. After that, the spiral sped up. 2 weeks later, my office manager walked into my office holding an envelope. No return address. Inside was a handwritten letter from Sophie. Not angry, worse, emotional. She wrote about memories, vacations, old jokes, the first apartment we rented together. At the end she wrote, "I know you still care somewhere under all that pride." I folded the paper once and dropped it into the trash. Not dramatically, just finished with it. That night, Natalie watched me lock the back door before bed. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah." "You sure?" I nodded. People mistake calm for confusion. I'm not confused. 3 days later, Sophie showed up one final time. No makeup, no performance, just exhausted. I stepped outside before she could knock. She looked at me for a long moment. "You really hate me now?" "No," I said calmly. "If I hated you, I'd still be emotionally attached." That hurt her more than anger would have. Her eyes watered slightly. "I made mistakes, Ronald. You made choices. You don't understand how hard things got after the divorce." I almost laughed at that. "You walked away from stability because you thought peace was boring." She looked down. "I thought there was something better." "And was there?" Silence answered for her. Cars passed slowly behind her on the street. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked. Normal life kept moving. Finally, Sophie looked back at me. "I just wanted my life back." I shook my head once. "No," I said evenly. "You wanted access back." Her face tightened immediately because she knew it was true. Not love, not regret. Access. To the house, the security, the control, the version of me that used to carry her chaos without complaint. That man was gone. She stepped closer slightly. "So, that's it? After everything?" I looked directly at her. "You ended this marriage years ago, Sophie. I just finally stopped reopening the door." She stood there another few seconds like she expected something softer to come after that. Nothing did. Finally, she nodded slowly. Then she turned, walked to her SUV, and drove away without looking back. And this time, I knew she wasn't coming back again. 3 months later, the house felt different again. Not because anything changed, because nothing did. No surprise visits, no fake accounts, no emotional mess showing up at the front door pretending to be closure. Just peace. One Friday evening, I sat at the kitchen counter while Natalie cooked pasta a few feet away. Music played low through the speakers. Rain tapped lightly against the windows. Simple night. The kind Sophie used to call boring. Natalie glanced over her shoulder. "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" "Thinking too hard." I smirked faintly. "Occupational hazard." She set 2 plates on the counter and slid one toward me. "You know, most people would have handled that situation terribly." "I know. You never lost control." I looked down at the steam rising from the plate for a second before answering. "No," I said calmly. "I just stopped giving chaos emotional access." Natalie nodded slowly, like she understood exactly what I meant. That was one of the reasons the relationship worked. She listened without turning everything into a test. After dinner, we moved to the living room. Same house, same walls, different life. 5 years earlier, Sophie sat in that same room calling me predictable, like it was an insult. Now the quiet felt earned. Around 9, Dave called. "You hear the latest?" he asked. "Nope." She moved again. I leaned back into the couch. "That makes what? 4 places?" "5," Dave corrected. "And apparently she quit another job." I didn't respond right away. Dave noticed. "You don't care anymore, do you?" I looked across the room at Natalie, reading under the lamp. The warmth, the calm, the complete lack of tension. Then I answered honestly. "No, I just don't carry her anymore." Dave chuckled quietly. "Good. Took you long enough." After we hung up, Natalie closed her book and studied me for a second. "You okay?" I looked around the room once. At the house I rebuilt. At the life that survived. At the peace nobody had to beg for. Then I nodded. "Yeah," I said. "The house is quiet again." Natalie smiled softly and leaned against my shoulder while the rain kept falling outside. And 5 years after Sophie walked away believing stability was weakness, the final thing she heard from behind my front door wasn't anger. It was a lock clicking shut. Thank you for watching.